Today we're talking all about chatterbaits and how versatile they can actually be. Most anglers think of them as just a one-trick pony, but I'm going to show you how I'm fishing them, where I'm fishing them, and I've even got a trick I know you're not using. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one.
Ah, there we go, that's one. That's a good one. Ooh, that feels pretty good. Ooh, he came up and he got that dude right off the bat.
Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And as I said in the opening, today we're talking all about these guys. Chatterbaits, bladed jigs, vibrating jigs. They have so many names, but we all know what it is. It's a swim jig type lure with a blade attachment for some flash and for some added thump. When these things hit the market years ago, they took the bass fishing world by storm, and it's never really been the same since. As a matter of fact, every company out there seems to be making their own version of this. This is a Strike King Thunder Cricket. You've got the original, the Z-Man Chatterbait. You've got the Berkeley Slobberknocker. As a matter of fact, I even make my own here at the house, which I really like. But why are they so popular? Well, they're very, very effective. But the thing about it is most anglers only see them as a situational bait. We have to have cloudy skies, we have to have a good bit of wind, a good bit of current, and some chomp on the water. And whatever you do, never, ever, ever fish a chatterbait in clear water. Well, today we're going to take all of that and throw it right out the window. I'm going to talk about how I'm fishing a chatterbait, where I'm fishing it, the gear that I'm using, and we're even going to look at a hack that I do that I know you don't know about. So stick around for all of that. But before we get started, if you like bass fishing content that always tries to be inclusive, whether you fish from the boat or whether you're fishing from the bank, and always thinking about budget because not everyone has a lot of money to spend on bass fishing gear, then this is the channel for you. Click that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, give this video a like. I would really appreciate it. So, this is the standard one that everybody thinks about, right? White with a chrome blade. You put a paddle tail on here, a Kitech, a Rage Swimmer, or what have you, and you start fishing this around. You cast it out there, and you start slow winding it back to you, right? That's how you fish a chatterbait. A lot of guys think of it as an analog or as a replacement for a spinnerbait. They're fishing them in the same types of situations. And while that can be effective, it also greatly limits what you can do with a bladed jig. And I've talked about this before. The first thing you want to do is you want to reassess the type of trailer that you're using. While a paddle tail swim bait can be good and you can get some bites on it, that boot tail, that paddle tail, when it kicks in the water, adds added drag. And it limits how this bait performs in the water. Sure, it will still thump. Sure, it'll still vibrate. But it won't have the action that you can give it. It won't have all of the action that you can give it. That's why my first preference for using a bladed jig is always with a fluke type of trailer, a soft plastic jerkbait. Just something like this standard fluke. I like the cream soft plastic jerkbaits probably best because usually I want something a little bit harder because while that tail will still flick, that more rigid body will allow that bladed jig to wiggle a lot more under the surface of the water. As you can see here, you can see how that bladed jig is moving under the water as compared to a paddle tail. There is a lot more vibration. You can clearly see that. Now, what that does is that allows you to fish it in different ways. Now, for me, I am rarely doing a straight retrieve with a bladed jig. Now, I will sometimes if I'm fishing it like I would a spinnerbait. If I'm casting it down a bank, if I'm paralleling a bank and I'm trying to bring it back to me, or I see a stretch of water that I want to work, I will cast it out and I will definitely bring it back in. But even then, my preference is to work it more like a swim jig than I am working it like a spinnerbait. And that means that I'm incorporating some pops and some twitches and some snaps when I'm working that bait to get it to go up and down and up and down. Maybe drop down a little bit and then snap it back up. Maybe let it go all the way down to the bottom drag it a little bit like I would a normal type of jig, and then pop it up and start reeling again. That type of retrieve can really get those bass activated. It can make them much more interested in the bait, draw out their curiosity. They see that it's injured. They might be more curious about it in different ways. You might even get a few more reaction strikes. So step number 2 is, after the trailer, think about a different type of retrieve. So combining a fluke type trailer with a more swim jig type of retrieve. Like I said, a lot of times I will even do the Alabama shake, where I will have my rod in my hand and I'll be doing the Alabama shake, getting that bladed jig to do like this, vibrate just a little bit under the water. And another thing, and the main thing that the Alabama shake does, is it allows me to retrieve that bait more slowly, yet stay higher up in the water column. And when I'm fishing a lot of vegetation, all that hydrilla that we have in the big lake, that's something that I always need to be aware of. I want to come all the way across the top of that vegetation. Now, the surprising thing about these is they actually will go through the vegetation immensely well. And we're going to talk about that, because there's a different type of bladed jig setup that I like to use whenever I'm fishing the thick hydrilla. And believe it or not, it comes through that thick hydrilla so well. And that's this setup right here. Now, this is one of my homemade ones. This is the ones that I make myself. But this is still the same setup. It's a jig with a blade on it. And in this instance, I have a craw trailer. A craw trailer on these things totally unlocks a completely different type of action. These things will vibrate, they will move all over the place, they will even begin to hunt. And that allows me to really rip and pop these and work them almost like I'm working a regular jig through the densest, thickest hydrilla. And that again allows me to unlock a different level of versatility, a different way to work this completely. So as you can see, we're moving farther and farther away from the standard type of regular old chatterbait retrieves and situations. As a matter of fact, when I'm fishing this in that hydrilla, that water is crystal gin clear. I often fish these in clear water because the big lake is a clear water lake, and fishing something like this gets me great bites. But I'm fishing it, like I said, I'm fishing it in a very different way. That little craw trailer, if you're not using something like a little craw trailer, I'm telling you what, give it a try. You will notice right off of the bat how much more rapid vibration you feel in the rod. That it will be a more steady, a lot quicker vibration as this thing is really going around. And as I said, I work it like I would a normal jig. I'm casting it out to those open areas in the hydrilla, and I can bring it back through. I can yo-yo it like I would if I'm flipping or pitching, which is great because it does the vibrating thing and then goes back down. Or I can work it like a swim jig, like I said, and tick the tops of that hydrilla. Either way, it gets me some monster bites. And this is the gear that I'm using when I'm fishing that bladed jig through the thick slop. It's my standard normal bait cast setup. I've got 30-pound braid on here, a 7-foot medium heavy. This is a Duckett inshore rod. This is my standard rod that I use. This rod is an old school. This is an Abu Garcia Riva S. They haven't made these for years, but you can get something like a Revo X or even a Revo SX, and those will act as an analog. They'll be pretty close to what this is. This has got a little bit higher gear ratio on it. I believe this is a 7:3:1. This is a 7:3:1 reel. So it's a little bit faster. Normally I'm using something like a 6.4 whenever I'm doing things inside the hydrilla, but this also works well for me. I've got this on a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. Now, another type of leader I'll use a lot of times is some monofilament if those bass are really aggressive and they're taking that bait. I'll put a monofilament on there simply because I want that extra stretch. That little bit of extra stretch when those bass go up and they really inhale it allows me to set that hook without risking snapping the line, ripping it out of their mouth, or what have you. So bear that in mind. You can either use fluorocarbon or you can use monofilament. Either one should work just fine. Now, we're going to talk about the last trick that I use. And this, when I learned about it, totally revolutionized and changed how I fish a chatterbait. And that's this guy right here. This is the chatter tube. This is a regular 1/4 ounce Z-Man chatterbait. I've taken the skirt off of it and I've just threaded a tube on it. I like a white tube. You can use whatever color tube you want to. Now this thing right here is just crazy in the water. It spirals down like a tube, but it also vibrates. It incorporates the best parts of a chatterbait and a tube presentation. I can work this in the vegetation and I can also work it in some other open water areas. I'm fishing this more in places and how I'm fishing a tube rather than how I'm fishing something like a bladed jig or whether I'm fishing like something like a spinnerbait. And it's just so simple to rig up, right? All I did was I took and I slid a tube over the top of this bladed jig. That's all I've done. Now, the only thing you have to make sure of is there's that head right there. I've taken the skirt off. Is that when you're sliding that tube up, you go all the way past the head, all the way past it, and then you work it back down like that so it stays in place. You know, if you have this is a 3.5 inch tube, just a regular Yum tube, that hook's going to come out the bottom. If you have a longer tube, like a 4-inch tube, that hook's going to come out through the body somewhere. That's the only thing you're really going to have to worry about. It's the only thing you're really going to have to think about. And again, I'm fishing this right here. This is basically my standard casting setup. And since I'm fishing this a lot of times in open water, this is what I'm using. 7.2 medium heavy. This has got a mod fast tip because when I'm cranking, that's the type of tip I would rather have. It allows the bass to really take that bait much better. I've got 12-pound fluorocarbon on here, and a lot of guys might think that's light, but it works for me. I'm able to fish this bait with the feel and finesse that I really want to. And this time, I'm usually fishing this more in a yo-yo type presentation to allow that tube presentation to do what it does best. I'll pop it up, I'll give it a few cranks, and then I'll kill it and I'll let it twirl down. And I'll dead stick it there for 5-10 seconds. Pop it back up with a quick snap of the rod, give it a couple more cranks, and then I'll let it spiral back down. Sometimes I'll pop it up and then crank it for a while, almost all the way back to the boat. But I like to let it stop to let the tube do the tube thing where it spirals back down. Now, I've only got a 1/4 ounce weight for that. I'm not using a very big bladed jig for that. And the reason being is because I don't want to kill the action of that tube. If you use too big of a weight, you're going to overpower that tube and it's just going to sink like a stone. And while, yeah, you can get some bites doing that, I prefer to use the tube as a tube is intended, and that's to get that spiraling glide. It really does make a huge difference. If you haven't tried putting a crawl or using a tube on your bladed jigs, I'm telling you, you don't know what you're missing out. That is the biggest way I found to reinvent the bait. Doing it normally like this, sure, you can get a lot of bites, but a lot of guys are doing this, and it works great mimicking a spinnerbait. You're actually going to get a lot of bites doing that. But when you really unlock it, when you say, okay, I don't care if I have a sunny day or some clear water, you can still fish it in those conditions. Or you can change the trailer out. Like I said, with this guy here, look how compact that is. This is just a 1/4 ounce bladed jig that I've made. I've cut that skirt down quite a bit. So it looks like the hook shank is a lot shorter than it really is, but I've cut that skirt down quite a bit. This is just a Guggen Kraken crawler that I've cut down and I've put on this, and it's that real tight, compact. It's almost like a Chatterbait Mini, right? Where you have that compact presentation. And I can fish this, like I said, I can fish this in a lot of places where I'm fishing a jig, where I'm fishing a Texas rig. And that blade on there, believe it or not, will keep that bait weedless. So give those tricks a try. I'm telling you, it will totally change how you're fishing a bladed jig. So there you have it. Some really easy tricks and hacks that anyone can do to totally change your chatterbait fishing. It makes such an improvement and definitely increases the areas and the conditions you can fish a bladed jig. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.